when God is about to bless you. These 7 things start happening. Have you ever noticed that sometimes, right before something good happens in your life, everything seems to get harder? Doors begin to close. Plans suddenly fall apart. People you trusted start drifting away. And in those moments, it can feel confusing. You may wonder if something is going wrong. You might even ask yourself, why does life feel more difficult now than before? But what if those difficult moments are not a sign that God has abandoned you? What if they are actually a sign that something powerful is about to happen? Throughout the Bible, there is a pattern that appears again and again. Before God brings someone into a season of blessing, He often allows a season of preparation first. And that preparation does not always look like success. Sometimes it looks like waiting. Sometimes it looks like struggle. Sometimes it even looks like loss. Before Joseph rose to a position of power that would save many lives, he walked through betrayal, slavery, and years of uncertainty. Before David sat on the throne of Israel, he spent long seasons hiding in caves, running for his life, and wondering when God's promise would finally come true. And even in the life of Jesus Christ, the greatest victory came only after one of the darkest moments in history. This pattern reveals something important. God often prepares people in hidden seasons before revealing what He has planned. And during those hidden seasons, certain signs begin to appear. Signs that most people overlook. Signs that can look like problems on the surface, but actually carry a deeper meaning. For example, you may notice that certain relationships begin to change. People who were once close suddenly grow distant. Or you may experience challenges that seem to test your patience, your faith, and your trust in God. These moments can feel uncomfortable, but they may also be part of something greater that God is doing behind the scenes. Because when God is about to move in someone's life, He often begins by preparing their heart, their environment, and their faith. And if you have recently been experiencing unusual changes in your life, changes that you cannot fully explain, you may be standing at the edge of a new season. In this message, we are going to explore 7 powerful signs that often appear when God is preparing to bless someone's life. And the final sign is the one that surprises most people, because it often appears at the exact moment when everything seems the most uncertain. So if you have been feeling like something in your life is shifting, if doors are closing, if your faith is being tested, do not ignore what might be happening, because these could be the very signs that your breakthrough is closer than you think. One of the first signs that God may be preparing to bless your life is something that often feels frustrating at the beginning. Doors begin to close. Plans you were excited about suddenly fall apart. Opportunities you expected to work out simply disappear. Situations you thought were certain begin to change in ways you did not anticipate. And in those moments, it is easy to believe something has gone wrong. You may begin asking questions like, why did that opportunity disappear? Why didn't that plan work out? Why did everything suddenly stop moving forward? But sometimes, what feels like a closed door is actually protection. Throughout the Bible, God often redirects people by closing the paths that were never meant to lead them to their true purpose. A closed door can feel disappointing in the moment, but later, it can become clear that the path behind that door would have taken you far away from the life God intended for you. In the life of Joseph, everything about his situation seemed to move in the wrong direction. He lost his home. He lost his freedom. He was placed in environments he never planned to enter. From the outside, it looked like every door was closing. Yet those closed doors were actually guiding him step by step toward the exact place where God would use him. Each difficult moment was positioning him for something greater that he could not yet see. Something similar happened in the life of David. David was anointed to become king, yet his path to that promise was anything but easy. Instead of immediately stepping into leadership, he spent years facing obstacles and running from danger. Many doors that seemed logical for his future were suddenly blocked. But those closed paths forced David to depend on God in ways that shaped his faith and character. Those difficult seasons were not delays. They were preparation. And this is something many people misunderstand about closed doors. A closed door does not always mean failure. Sometimes it simply means that God is guiding you toward a different direction. When a door closes, it can remove distractions that would have pulled you away from your purpose. It can prevent relationships or environments that would have weakened your faith. And sometimes it simply slows you down long enough for God to shape your heart before the next opportunity arrives. Even in the teachings of Jesus Christ, there is a powerful reminder about the paths we choose in life. Not every road leads to the destination God has prepared. Some paths may look appealing at first, but they ultimately lead away from what truly matters. That is why God sometimes blocks certain opportunities, because the blessing He is preparing requires a different path. Think about it this way. If every door in life stayed open, it would be easy to walk into situations that damage your future. Closed doors guide you. They narrow your direction. They help remove paths that could lead you away from what God is building in your life. So if you are experiencing a season where certain opportunities suddenly disappear or plans begin to collapse, do not immediately assume that everything is falling apart. Sometimes those closed doors are the very first sign that God is clearing the way for something far greater than you imagined. Because before the right door opens, God often closes the ones that would have taken you somewhere else. Another sign that often appears when God is preparing to bless your life is something that can feel deeply personal. Certain people begin to leave your life. At first, it may happen slowly. Conversations become less frequent. Friendships begin to feel different. People who once felt very close suddenly seem distant. Sometimes there is no clear argument, no dramatic conflict, just a quiet change that you cannot fully explain. And when this happens, many people immediately assume they did something wrong. They replay conversations in their minds. They wonder if they said the wrong thing. They question whether the relationship could have been saved. But sometimes the change is not caused by a mistake. Sometimes it is caused by a shift in direction. As God begins preparing someone for a new season, the environment around them often begins to change. And that environment includes the relationships in their life. This does not mean that the people leaving are bad people. It simply means that not everyone is meant to walk with you into the next chapter of your journey. Throughout the Bible, this pattern appears many times. In the story of Joseph, the people closest to him became the very ones who rejected his future. His brothers could not understand the dreams God placed in his heart. Because they could not see his calling, they opposed it. What Joseph experienced looked like betrayal. But years later, it became clear that the separation was part of a larger plan. The place Joseph was sent to, the land of Egypt, was exactly where God would position him to fulfill his purpose. If he had remained where he started, that future might never have unfolded. Something similar happened in the life of David. David's path toward becoming king was not surrounded by constant support. There were seasons when people misunderstood him. There were moments when he had to walk through isolation. But those seasons strengthened his faith and deepened his trust in God. Sometimes the people who walk away from your life are not meant to harm you. They are simply not meant to walk the entire journey with you. Every life has different seasons. Some relationships belong to a specific chapter. Some people enter your life to teach you something. Some arrive to support you during a difficult moment. But when that season ends, the relationship may naturally change. Holding on to relationships that belong to the past can sometimes slow the direction God is trying to lead you toward. This is why separation is often part of spiritual growth. Even during the ministry of Jesus Christ, many people followed him at the beginning. They were amazed by his miracles. They were fascinated by the authority of his teachings. But when his message required deeper commitment, many people stopped following him. The crowd became smaller. Yet the purpose of his mission remained the same. This reveals an important truth. Not everyone who begins the journey with you is meant to finish it with you. Some people are part of the early chapters. Others are part of the middle of the story. And a few are meant to walk beside you for the long road ahead. So if you notice that certain relationships are changing as your life moves into a new direction, do not immediately assume that something is broken. Sometimes those changes are part of a quiet transition. Because before God opens a new chapter in your life, he often reshapes the environment around you. And sometimes that reshaping begins with the people who are meant to stay and the people who are meant to step away. Another powerful sign that God may be preparing to bless your life is something that many people misunderstand at first. Your faith begins to be tested. You may start facing situations that challenge your patience. Unexpected problems appear. Prayers seem to take longer to be answered. Circumstances become more complicated than you expected. And during those moments, it can feel confusing. You may wonder why life suddenly feels more difficult, especially when you are trying to move closer to God. But throughout Scripture, seasons of testing often appear before seasons of breakthrough. Testing reveals something important. It shows what is truly inside a person's heart. Faith is easy when everything is going well. It is easy to trust when the future looks clear. But when the road becomes uncertain, that is when faith becomes real. In the life of Abraham, God made a promise that seemed almost impossible. He promised that Abraham would become the father of many nations. Yet for many years, that promise appeared to remain unfulfilled. Abraham had to wait far longer than he expected. During that waiting period, his faith was tested again and again. There were moments when the promise seemed distant, moments when the future looked unclear. Yet the testing was shaping something deeper within him. It was strengthening the very faith that would later become the foundation of that promise. Another powerful example appears in the life of Job. Job experienced one of the most difficult seasons described in Scripture. He lost his wealth. He lost his security. His life suddenly changed in ways he never imagined. From the outside, it looked like everything had collapsed. But the story of Job reveals something deeper. Even in the middle of confusion and pain, Job continued seeking God. His faith did not disappear. And in the end, the story did not finish with loss. It finished with restoration. This pattern appears again and again. God often allows testing before releasing greater responsibility or blessing. Testing prepares people for what comes next. Think about a tree growing strong roots beneath the ground. Before the branches grow tall and wide, the roots must first grow deep. If the roots remain shallow, the tree cannot survive strong winds. Faith works in a similar way. Testing deepens the roots of trust. It builds endurance. It teaches patience. And most importantly, it helps people rely on God rather than only on their circumstances. Even in the life of Jesus Christ, there was a season of testing before his ministry began. Before teaching crowds and performing miracles, he spent time in the wilderness facing temptation. That season was not random. It was preparation. It strengthened his focus and clarified his mission. So if you are currently walking through a season where your faith feels stretched, if prayers seem delayed, if circumstances feel more challenging than usual, it may not be a sign that God has forgotten you. Sometimes it is the opposite. Sometimes it is a sign that God is preparing your heart for something greater. Because when the next season arrives, the strength of your faith will determine how firmly you can stand. And often, the deeper the testing, the greater the preparation for what is coming next. Another surprising sign that God may be preparing to bless your life is this. You begin to feel uncomfortable in places that once felt completely normal. Things that used to satisfy you no longer feel the same. Conversations that once seemed interesting now feel empty. Environments that once felt familiar begin to feel different. At first, this change can feel confusing. You may wonder why your interests are shifting. Why certain habits no longer bring the same sense of peace. Why situations that once felt comfortable now feel heavy. But often, this kind of discomfort is not random. It is a signal that growth is happening. When God begins leading someone into a new season, their heart often begins to change first. Their values start shifting. Their focus becomes clearer. And things that once felt normal begin to lose their influence. This internal change can feel unsettling, because it means you are no longer fully connected to the environment that once shaped you. Yet you may not have fully stepped into the new direction God is preparing either. So you find yourself in an in-between season, not fully belonging to the past, not fully standing in the future yet. Many people in the Bible experienced this exact moment. In the life of Moses, there was a powerful turning point. Moses had grown up in the palace of Egypt. He had access to comfort, power, and security. From the outside, his life appeared successful. Yet something inside him began to shift. He became aware of the suffering of his people. And the palace that once represented security began to feel like the wrong place for his purpose. That inner discomfort was not a mistake. It was the beginning of a transformation. God was preparing Moses for a mission far greater than the environment he had known before. Something similar happened in the life of Peter. Before following Jesus Christ, Peter lived the life of a fisherman. It was familiar, predictable, safe. But when Jesus called him to follow a different path, the life he once knew could no longer satisfy the calling that had begun growing inside him. That moment of discomfort became the doorway to transformation. Peter's future would extend far beyond the shores where he once worked. Discomfort often appears when someone is outgrowing the season they are currently in, and growth almost always requires change. Think about a seed growing beneath the soil. Before it breaks through the surface, there is pressure. The seed must crack open. The environment inside the soil becomes too small for what the seed is becoming. In the same way, spiritual growth often creates a sense that your current environment is no longer where you are meant to remain. It does not mean everything around you is wrong. It simply means your direction is changing. And when God begins preparing someone for a new level of purpose, their heart often begins to detach from the old patterns that once shaped their life. So if you find yourself feeling restless in situations that once felt comfortable, if certain environments now drain your energy instead of strengthening your spirit, it may not be confusion. It may be growth. Because before God leads someone into a new season, He often changes what their heart is willing to settle for. And that quiet shift is often the beginning of something far greater than they can see yet. One of the most powerful signs that God may be preparing to bless your life is something that often appears quietly. It is a deep sense of peace. Not the kind of peace that comes from perfect circumstances, but a peace that appears even when life still feels uncertain. There may still be unanswered questions. You may not fully understand where your path is leading. Some situations around you may still feel unresolved. Yet somewhere within your heart, there is a calm confidence that everything will eventually work out. This type of peace is different from ordinary comfort. It does not depend on external situations. It does not disappear when challenges appear. Instead, it feels like a quiet assurance that God is guiding the path ahead. Throughout Scripture, this kind of peace often appeared when people chose to trust God even when the future was unclear. In the life of Daniel, there were moments when his circumstances could have easily created fear. He lived in a foreign land. He faced powerful rulers. He even faced the threat of death because of his faith. Yet Daniel continued to live with remarkable calmness and trust. His peace did not come from safety. It came from knowing that God was with him no matter what happened. That kind of confidence allowed him to remain faithful even in the most uncertain situations. Something similar can be seen in the life of Paul the Apostle. Paul experienced imprisonment, persecution, and constant challenges. From the outside, his life seemed filled with difficulty. Yet the letters he wrote often spoke about joy, hope, and peace. That peace came from a deep trust that God's purpose was still unfolding, even through difficult circumstances. Even the teachings of Jesus Christ speak about a peace that the world cannot provide. It is not a temporary feeling. It is a spiritual assurance that God's presence remains constant regardless of what happens around us. When someone begins experiencing that kind of peace, it often signals that their heart has shifted from fear toward trust. Instead of constantly worrying about the future, they begin focusing on faith. Instead of trying to control every outcome, they begin surrendering their plans to God. This shift changes the way a person moves through life. They become less controlled by anxiety, less shaken by sudden changes, and more grounded in the belief that God is still working behind the scenes. That quiet peace often appears before major breakthroughs, because it prepares the heart to receive blessings without becoming overwhelmed by fear or doubt. Think of it like the calm before sunrise. The sky may still be dark. The light may not yet be visible, but something in the atmosphere begins to change. You can sense that morning is approaching even before the sun appears. In the same way, spiritual peace can be a sign that God is preparing something new in your life. It may arrive before the blessing becomes visible. It may appear before the answers fully unfold. But that calm assurance reminds you that your journey is not random. God is still guiding each step. And when that peace begins to settle deeply within your heart, it may be one of the clearest signs that something meaningful is on the horizon. When people think about blessings, they often imagine sudden breakthroughs. They imagine doors opening instantly, problems disappearing overnight, life suddenly becoming easier. But the truth revealed throughout the Bible is often very different. Before God releases a blessing, He prepares the person who will receive it. And that preparation does not always look exciting from the outside. Sometimes it looks like closed doors. Sometimes it looks like waiting. Sometimes it looks like seasons of testing that stretch your patience and faith. Yet each of those moments has a purpose. They shape your character. They strengthen your trust in God. And they slowly prepare your heart for the responsibility that comes with greater blessings. Think about the stories we reflected on. Joseph did not step into leadership immediately. He walked through betrayal, hardship, and years of uncertainty before reaching the place where God would use him. David was anointed as king long before he ever sat on the throne. He faced battles, fear, and long seasons of preparation that strengthened his faith. Moses spent decades in the wilderness before stepping into the mission that would change history. And even the life of Jesus Christ reveals this same pattern. Before his ministry reached crowds across the land, there were quiet seasons of preparation that shaped his purpose. These stories reveal something important. God rarely rushes the process of preparation, because blessings without preparation can easily become burdens. But when the heart is ready, when faith has been strengthened, when patience has been developed, then the blessing arrives at the right moment. So if you recognize some of the signs we discussed today, closed doors, testing seasons, growing discomfort with old environments, or a new sense of peace, do not assume something is wrong. Those moments may actually be evidence that something meaningful is being prepared behind the scenes. Your current season may not look like the breakthrough you expected, but preparation is often the hidden stage before transformation. And many people who eventually experience powerful blessings first walk through quiet seasons where God shapes their faith. So keep moving forward. Keep trusting even when the path feels uncertain, because sometimes the greatest blessings begin long before we are able to see them. And when the time is right, the door God opens will lead exactly where your journey was always meant to go.